Yeah.
It looks great. 6:59, we have 1 minute. Pip is coming. I just.
Pip's here. Pip was here. Oh, Pip's back. Pip came early.
It's on time.
Pip came early. But he come early and then.
It's gonna be later on time.
Yes, I'm saying please.
If it was the day.
Yeah, I.
Actually.
Next, I think it's.
You said same.
Oh, so you're-
Yeah.
Then
Then I ends up in my life, so.
Yeah. And he decided to- The meeting.
Which I appreciate. Thank you for that.
Okay. I think we. Welcome, everyone, to the July 10th, 2025 Portsmouth School Board meeting. Patty, can you call, roll?
Absolutely. Genevieve Beckstead Muskie.
Here.
Tish Campbell,
Here,
Nancy Claver.
Here.
Kip Clues. Here. Brian French.
Here.
Lee Hudson. Byron Matto.
Here.
Carrie Nolte.
here.
Lisa Rappaport.
Here.
Eric Moore. Nathan Delaney.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Patty. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
Liberty and justice.
Announcements, recognitions.
I just wanted to welcome Carl Weber, who's the new deputy city manager, is on the ground now. Suzanne Woodline is stepping back into a smaller role. So Mr. Weber's doing the rounds, talking to people, and we just had a really good conversation just sitting. He gets ready to come in. He's very interested in the school department, about the things that we are. What are our big initiatives? What are the big challenges? That's really good conversation. Some of the stuff was about some of our initiatives, but some of that conversation was also about process in terms of the whole city umbrella. So, optimistic and really appreciate him taking the time to spend some time talking to students.
And how did the last days of school go?
So, hey, we are. Wow, well, I guess we had a short meeting, but with the, good. I think we closed out well. I think this has been, I've heard with staff, but this was I think a challenging year across the district. We had a lot of things that people needed to overcome. We had some student and family deaths, that were part of our part of the equation. We had to deal with all this stuff around the Trump administration on the funding. We were doing redistricting. There was just a lot of combination of crises and really hard things that we were doing over the course of the year. I think people were happy to head to the beach. And so I'm excited for staff that they have the opportunity to get away, to recharge. Of course, not all staff, custodians still working really hard over the course of the summer to get us all set up for what we need to do for next year. And a lot of our other people, administrators on site and some of our administrative assistants, but for the bulk of staff to be able to step away and catch your breath, I think is really important because it was a good year. It was a lot of good things, but I think it was a emotionally tiring year for a lot of folks. So, but yeah, the closeout was
Oh,
good.
yeah, it was good.
Great.
Well. Thanks.
Anyone else have an announcement or recognition? We'll move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Can we clump all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meeting minutes together? Do we have a motion to accept all of those? Okay. Thank you. Any discussion?
I'm unable to access the May 27th non-public. Do that.
It's the first page in my packet.
I know in the link here also I have no preview available.
Okay,
So maybe that's one for us to.
that's okay. It's here. It all is good. I wasn't. Oh. No, that one I wasn't here for the 10th. Yep. That's fine.
I have it here. Do you want to see?
Genevieve brought it up for me,
Oh.
so I'm good. Doesn't work on my computer though.
Yeah, I get to know preview available on my link as well.
Okay, anyone else have a comment for discussion? All those in favor?
Roll call.
Oh, roll
Yeah.
call, sorry.
Genevieve Backstep Muskie. Tish Campbell.
Yes.
Nancy Claiber.
Yes.
Pip Clues. Yes. Brian French.
Yes.
Byron Matto.
Yes.
Terry Nolte.
Yes.
Lisa Rappaport. Six passed.
Next, we have public comment. We open up the public comment session. Like there's no one here for public comment. Is there anyone on Zoom for public comment? No, okay. We'll close the public comment session. Superintendent's report. Councilman Hoffman.
Yes, so, couple of things that are just updates to those overnight requests from the school board emails. I did want to spend a little bit of time on the superintendent memo. I think I've had some conversation with some of you about this ongoing process. The governance committee of the city council composed of board members of the city council, members of the legal department. They're in the process of doing a review of ordinances that are administrative ordinances connected to the charter. So basically, you've got the charter. We think of it as like the Constitution for the city, and then there are these ordinances underneath it that kind of spell out things in more detail. And so there's been an ongoing conversation for a couple months now. I think we started back in February having this conversation around language. There was a consideration of language that would centralize IT operations under the city's chief information officer, the CIO. So he's been hired in the last 18 months or so. And so we're having some dialogue about that. We talked about both the schools, particularly the schools and the police department. I've had having some conversations about some concerns around operations connected to those things. We've also been talking about the intersection of state law around the empowerment of school boards to do certain things, and the charter, and when those two things intersect, how should we interpret that? And then really kind of having conversations about what are your powers as a school board here in Portsmouth. And it hasn't been a broad conversation. It's been very specifically around this. But one of the things that's that in the language that has now at this point moved past the committee and is now going to go to the city council for multiple readings. So we'll have multiple opportunities if you want to contribute to that conversation. It would move, amongst other things, it would move approval over purchasing within IT to the city. And so one of the things I think that is interesting about that is, I know Byron before, when we were in budget season, talked about inside of the city charter. It speaks specifically to the fact that the school board has line item control over the stuff that's also reflective of state law. And yeah, so I think there's the language of the charter also speaks to mirrors again the state law that you have operational control over schools for the city of Portsmouth. The legal department has indicated verbally that they feel that this is not, there's not a legal question present, and that they are confident that we'll be able to present a legal or thorough kind of legal justification in whatever goes to the council. But I think it's something that you want to keep an eye on. And I think that we want to make sure that we know that I don't think that's a small move, if that's the case, because I think there's so many things in what we do that are intertwined with digital platforms and IT, a lot of different operational pieces. So at the very least, I think it's important just to keep an eye on it over the next. Again, I don't think the city council's not going to even see the draft until sometime in August, and they anticipate 2 to 3 readings before ordinance would get passed anyways. But at this point, the language that would move that authority to the city has left the governance committee and is on its way to the council for consideration.
Governance, not governors.
Not the governor's committee, governance. It's the city council's governance committee.
Any questions? Pip?
Yeah, I can see that, I imagine that the reason part of their motivation for this is to have some like more efficiency.
Absolutely.
But from a financial standpoint, that makes sense to me. But I'm wondering about how you view the efficiency in terms of having to wait for approvals for things. Like I'm thinking about, particularly like special ed, would that be under the same
I
category?
think it's all,
You don't think
I think to be,
required?
I want to be really fair to the conversation. I know, that the dialogue right now is that, well, right now, we all collaborate. And so there's ongoing conversations between our IT folks and city IT. We assist one another at times on some things, not a lot, but it's there, and it's just an ongoing dialogue. And so the conversation's been like, it's fine, don't worry about it. It hasn't been nothing's been heavy-handed. I think my concern is once you say this authority, the ability to say no has moved to somebody else. And whatever the rationale is about why no, that I do have concerns, like even right now, if all the players who are at the table, everybody is like plays well in the sandbox. You don't have ordinances for the days when you all agree. You have ordinances for the days when you don't. And so you fall back on, well, ultimately, if we disagree, whose authority is it to make these types of decisions? And this would definitely change our ability to just do things on our own,
Yeah.
for our own IT department. And instead would require that the language, I think, includes both IT and maybe finance. I'm trying to think what the final language. So there's two different city departments that would be involved in any purchases that were connected to. Now what they haven't spelled out yet is once that goes into place, what are the mechanisms that would be in place in order to kind of go, what does that approval process look like? How would that work? But in terms of efficiency for us, efficiency of our operation, our ability to not financial efficiency, which is what they're looking for sure. And I understand, but efficiency is for us, the ability to respond quickly to things.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely slow down. And that I do worry about that. And I think, we're going to have an impact on our ability to deliver service in the way we want to deliver service.
Yeah, to me, it definitely seems at odds with the line item control.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Byron, Brian.
So do we have other scenarios? I don't know, but like HR as an example, well, that's true. Like, are there other scenarios where the city is sort of stepping in and doing jobs to be done that would normally be done by the school department?
So HR is one that we continue to feel out over time. And I think that, and originally this conversation was both, the ordinance language was both around HR and IT. It was actually a combination of those, and it really shifted more to the IT conversation. We still are over time feeling out the kind of the authority relationship in HR. And I think we have most of it down, but there are times where we've gotten, and this conversation actually led to, there was some upset in city HR about the fact that we're saying, it's a little murky sometimes about who's doing what. And specifically, it was around, at one point, we're talking about investigations. We're having about investigations of employees. Is it city HR's, when is city HR conducting these investigations? And when is my office or the principal? So what's that look like? And basically through this conversation that was sparked as a result of this stuff, I think we kind of moved towards, if there's a legal question involved around like an HR question of like harassment in the workforce or something like that, then HR would be the point to start utilizing Tom Clausen, who they contract with to handle labor issues. They would develop findings that then would be turned over to my office. But if it's just general, it would only be in these like specific arenas. But what's interesting is, and we did not have a lot of this conversation. I wasn't really on this, thinking about this in a deeper way until we got into this kind of January dialogue. Have kind of pursued it more and more because I want to make sure I understand for you guys when, I think this is the way I described it to the city managers, and they said, it's important that the board, elected representatives, of people who oversee the schools, feel that we're all on the same page about what is the sandbox of your authority, your roles, and your role and responsibility in relation to the city service of education that is being provided. And then where is that line? Where's the line where then the city assumes some authority, but something indirectly connected to us? And I think that we have a lot of tradition about how that works, but some of the, yeah, we haven't codified it. And so that's why I think I think there's a great conversation to be had with the legal department comes out with their memo to kind of dissect that, think about it, think about not just in relation to IT, but in general, how do, what is the complete full context of the relationship between the greater municipal umbrella, charter departments of the schools? And it's true for police as well. But in IT land, for example, one of the things that ended up happening in this budget, which we didn't spend a lot of time on, was the city decided to create a cybersecurity position. And then broke up that cybersecurity position into slices. And then said, schools, you will pay for this. Fire, you will pay for this. Police, you will pay for this. And then I wonder about, I had to think about it at the time. So when we finished our budget process, and we're going to the council with the 2.9 version, Brian had to go and find another $30,000 to cover what was basically like a service to the schools that the city had decided they thought we had to have, and that they were going to effectively bill us for it. And so I think there's some interesting questions on things like that. Like, when can the city just decide, here's this thing you must have, and we have decided it, and now you must figure out how to pay for it. So those are all, and I don't think any of this is like nefarious. There's no malice in it. I think there's just, as I was talking to someone from the city yesterday, I think these are all in workplaces. When do you have people getting disgruntled with one another? It's around roles and responsibilities questions. And it's like, why aren't you doing the thing I think is your job? It's like, I don't think this is my job, I think it's your job. And that's usually where we get into trouble. And I think that this is just a big kid representative democracy version of that. What are those, like I said, sandboxes in which all the groups should play in? And and how does everybody feel like we're on the same page about what those things are? And I think the IT thing is just, I think is the tip of the iceberg of a bigger conversation in that regard that would be valuable for everybody.
Thank you, Brian. And then we have Lee on Zoom, but Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just breaks with the spirit of line item authority in the charter. It just doesn't seem that follows that spirit at all. And I'm thinking of, like, if we want to have, say it's part of our strategic plan to get Chromebooks, more Chromebooks, right? Like, now they have an actual line item they control versus just saying that a lot of money is, and I figure it out. I get the efficiencies. I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
I would prefer more of a MOU kind of situation where we're like, this is how we're gonna work together and achieve those efficiencies. I think there might be ways to achieve both goals, but it feels it doesn't jive with the spirit of it. It also does feel like a slippery slope of what else they can make efficient.
Right.
In the school board, and it starts to handcuff that separation today. So I'll be interested to see how things kind of shake out, but yeah.
And I would say two core things, and again, no malice on their part. I think they're legitimately trying to create efficiencies. The two things that are interesting is what they point to is they would say, look, there was a charter vote in 2000 that created, I think in the memo, I have the actual language that talks about a single department, including us. And they're saying, well, the people have spoken through the charter process, and now we are codifying that charter process. So there's that with that piece of the charter versus this other piece of the charter about line item control. So the charter might be at loggerheads for itself. And then the other question that we're working through and we're kind of having conversations about, trying to dig deep in on is the idea of generally city charters can't override state law. However, specific state law can create carve-outs for charters to do certain things. Only though when the state says, we specifically give you the right to do this. So we're spending some time in it's called enabling legislation, going back to the 1800s to when every time there were certain charter changes that were going on. We didn't spend a lot of time in this in the committee, but I know Susan Morel and I were talking about a little bit of this, and I've been spending some time in enabling legislation from the 1800s, where Portsmouth made particular changes in the charter, and the legislature approved those those things because it could be that it was not going to jive with other state law. I don't see anything yet, but I'm not an attorney, and I did not stay at Holiday Inn last night either. I think that's someone. So but I don't see anything that necessarily gives away these types of authorities that would be present here inside of some state enabling legislation. But I'm not an attorney. I just think it's a conversation. We want to make sure we fully understand for you guys, for the schools, and for your constituents, what this is and what it should be.
Please.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me. I'm still recovering, so
We got you, Lee.
I probably sound a little horrible. I apologize. I think the first thing that's concerning to me is that, school boards are really, we're supposed to prioritize student outcomes, right? Not municipal efficiencies. So that to me creates a conflict of interest in and of itself. When I hear things like HR, et cetera, I think of the fact that we might end up with a shift from child-centered staffing. And when I think about child-centered staffing, I'm thinking about, for example, specialists for special education and ending up with, generalized municipal standards as opposed to those that are directly reflecting school-specific needs. So that's concerning to me. The other aspect of that is that I think from a school standpoint, and what we actually try and achieve is flexibility and responsiveness to changing educational demands. And from that perspective, I think we're giving up some of that as we actually say, okay, well, we're setting a precedent, IT, whether it be IT or HR, we're setting a precedent by actually, allowing the city council and the city manager to take over some of that responsibility. And I think that's concerning to me. I think the other thing that's concerning to me then is that we also, on an annual basis, are directly accountable to parents and educators from a budget and a decision-making standpoint. And that becomes less opaque it becomes much more opaque to the parents when we actually say, okay, we're going to turn that over to the city. And that to me is problematic as well. So I just wanted to mention those few things because I'm a little concerned with what's occurring, even if we're saying it's not with malice, it's still problematic.
Oh.
Hi,
Sorry, say again.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my curiosity is, other school districts, are they under an umbrella like that? And if so, how is it working? I mean, I agree with what Lee just said. I feel like it would be setting a precedence. But I'm curious as to other school districts, are they under the umbrella of the city or town? And how is that working for them?
Most school districts are independent. And somewhat, we're in a city, which is much different. Departments, independent school districts. Most districts are independent school districts.
You're like your own, you're your own legal entity.
Which is unique to New Hampshire. That's different. Yeah.
So it's the way it worked in Vermont. We were separate. The municipal government didn't have any control over our operations.
So there's no community in New Hampshire that you know does this, as far as you know.
Just cities.
Just say.
Oh, just,
Mhm.
okay.
But just because of that structure.
Sorry, last time you were saying Nashua was different. It is a city, but it's separate.
Yeah, no, Nashville, you're still part of the city.
Oh, okay.
The only one that's a little different, is Concord. Concord's actually independent. More independent than we are, but that's by city term.
And again, what's interesting is this idea about, so it was a big case, spending too much time in law land. But there was a case where Manchester tried to just change their charter. They were like, nah, we don't want to have school board anymore. We're gonna put it to the voters. We're gonna change the city charter, and it's all gonna come underneath the mayor and the mayor's council or something like that. And they ended up, the school district went to court against the city. And ultimately, the ruling was, you can't just change the charter to grab authority that's not yours to have. You have to have enabling this state level carve out that is given to you by the legislature in order to do these other things. So if you wanted to do that in Manchester, you have to have the legislature approve basically the dissolving the other entity and having you assume all these controls, but it's only through the state legislature creating enabling legislation. So it's interesting stuff. I mean, when I walked in the door here, I didn't know how all this stuff works, and I'm learning more and more but shame on me, that that's the case. But I think this conversation has been interesting. I think city councilors are learning in this conversation, and the departments are learning. Everybody, as we kind of push around, I'm not sure I like that operational outcome. And we're all getting into the law a lot more than we had previously in terms of thinking about these roles and responsibilities.
I think Lisa had her hand up and Carrie.
I guess I would say, like, I can appreciate as a city and as a school district, that we would want to look for those economies of scale, especially on the really huge purchases, and that spirit makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But I share a lot of the other concerns voiced in terms of how it might impact curriculum and education on the ground. I'm even thinking, sitting on the teaching and learning subcommittee, illustrative math that we're using in the strategic plan to overhaul our whole K-12 math curriculum, that has a huge software component. So does that then fall under the city to say, well, too bad you like this math, we want that math because it fits our budget better? And I don't think that's the intention of this, but the vagueness of it concerns me. And I definitely have a lot of concerns around special education and to differentiate curriculum for kids on the spot. I mean, one of my children has an IEP with assistive technology. That's a process. I mean, it involves an outside, occupational therapist who specializes in tech for educational needs, who knows the specific, nuances of the disabilities and what has worked and not worked in other schools. And I would hate to have that type of decision-making slow down. Because if you wait another month to approve things for kids, you're delaying their education. And I would hate to have it not handled by experts who really specialize in technology for education. So, and I share a lot of other concerns that others have voiced, but those are the pieces that I want to.
One thing I wanted to mention was the way this conversation evolved. So part of it was twofold. One was around efficiency. And I think we're in the middle of the budget season at the same time. We're talking about it's a tough time, how do we find efficiencies? And I think that was definitely part of the flavor of the dialogue. Also, they brought in Ryan Babcock, who is the CIO. And they talked about what about ongoing cybersecurity concerns? And are we creating vulnerabilities because we've got the municipal side of the operation with their kind of IT systems, the school with a set, the police with a set? Are we creating vulnerabilities as a result of that? I will say fire, for the most part, is different in all this, and that they have. So we don't have any IT professionals, and they more or less do use they're all in on using city IT for their purposes. They also have less. They also have, I think, less users, less platforms, etc. that they're employed. But in that conversation about enhanced security with uniform standards, which we were in favor of, we said, yeah, let's lay out a collective kind of vision about the standards for cybersecurity. The CIO was saying, again, he was just saying, if you're going to ultimately hold me accountable for and that was the language. We're gonna have a uniform standard, but you're gonna be accountable for this standard. Then I need to have some control over what people are putting out and using, which comes via having the authority around spending. So that was, again, all this has been, it kind of evolved over time. But I do think it has some, definitely would have some potential for negative operational impacts on us. Yeah, I just have some kind of concerns, and I don't know what that looks like in the budget season. We go through a pre-approval process on IT stuff or anything at the platform. You were talking about the teaching and learning strategic plan stuff. We were trying to finalize the 2 pilots that we were going to look at on the folks here at 2 evaluations. Those both involve digital platforms. It's like, well, would we have to go through city IT, determine whether or not they would okay us to use the digital platform that we might decide would be in the best interest in advancing the strategic plan? Clear. I mean, this would say yes in some form, so.
So I guess I feel better if there's somebody who's really an expert in cybersecurity, who's taking a 10,000 foot view of things and saying, these are standards we want everybody in the city and schools, police and fire to adhere to. That makes some sense. But I guess I would feel more comfortable if there's a dollar threshold where if it's, $500 thing for one kid, that should be different than buying the entire district worth of Chromebooks. So in terms of the oversight, or if they are going to weigh in, I want there to be timelines on that are really rapid so that we're not delaying things that are needed on the ground while people feel ready.
And the inclusion, the finance piece was late, the inclusion of finance, because originally it was just IT was in there and then there was finance came in. Anyways, so that's where we lie at the moment. Just I would say keep your eye on what's coming up in the future. Sorry.
Carrie had her hand up, Nathan, and then Pip wants to go again.
Although I understand like the, I guess there's like a piece of what are the benefits, and one of those might be cybersecurity or that totally crashing system, but my understanding is that our systems are very distinct and separate. And so I guess 2 pieces. One of the things on like installing individual software, things like that, that's like administrative privileges in many cases. And so we're talking about security oversight. And I wonder if that's the level of detail they're looking at. Those are 2 different things. The other piece is just around the access to resources. So I know that there's a lot of like Google Classroom and things like that are available specifically to school districts. And if all of those have to be contracted or vetted through a city system, we may not qualify for free services that we are integral and we depend on now. And so I think that should be part of the calculus as well. And so it seems like there could be some benefit. I know we've talked mostly about the risks, but it's just unclear to me how the use of the current resources we have, which are all pretty standard for school districts, could actually negatively impact our security. And again, like I had something else, but it's gone now. So those 2.
Nathan, and then we have Pip, and then we have Lee again.
Yeah, to piggyback off of you, Lisa, like the amount of educational programming just at the high school alone is huge. So where their role would be in that of Wayfinder for advisory, how would that look? Programming and curriculum or math, everything that has been mentioned. I would want to see what that looks like. And then to go along with what everyone said, like if there was a clear issue in our cybersecurity or our like secure like web browsers at school, I could see why this would be like a topic of conversation that would have some sense of urgency. But to my understanding, our security is up to par, if not exceptional. So, I mean, we have like plenty of people working and doing their work there. So I'm struggling to understand why this is like security is even the conversation in all of it too, because it's my understanding that it's.
And to even push a little further on that point, the state requires any school applications that are used to be cleared through a clearinghouse that the state has determined and have that these companies or these applications have signed on to data privacy agreements so that they're already vetted through a whole nother system. So we're already lined up with some of the security, data privacy kind of considerations before we even say, hey, we want to try this new thing. We've got to say, oh, that's the new thing. Is it on this list? Has it been vetted? Have they signed this agreement? Is it in our, but like, there's so many more things than just, this is neat, we want to try it. So it's not like it's happening that quickly. There were already additional things in place when we were considering bringing on things like Wayfinder and all these other things that we looked at.
But I would just say it's fair. I think it is fair for public entities right now to be really worried about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
It's a growing
Yep.
problem. Nashua, we just mentioned Nashua a while ago.
Yep.
I mean, Nashua went through a very public situation where they big ransomware attack and stuff. And I think it's growing in terms of us being a target. So I think we want to be, I think one of the conversations will never be foolproof, but we want to be as hard a target as possible. So they go after some other school district, or some other municipality, not us. And so I think that's what they want to work towards. So.
Then we have Pip and then we have Lee.
Yeah, I think, it's this particular thing, perhaps it's because it's following our budget discussions. It feels like what I felt during the budget discussions was that other people were trying to do our job.
Yeah.
And weren't just trusting the expertise of this group or the department or the administrators.
Yeah.
And instead thinking they knew more than us, frankly.
Yes.
And I'm worried about that situation, and Lisa touched on it a bit, but we want the experts making the choices. We don't want somebody who's, who's works specifically with technology, but not educational technology, so I think that's where I'm feeling like it feels like a little bit of an overreach or a dismissal of the expertise that exists here. And I worry about that.
And I tried to frame the conversation with the city. I think there were some folks on the city side who were unhappy with me that I was still questioning. And I tried to frame it in that I said, well, I think we're in a period of time where I think board's not feeling great coming out of the budget, what we just went through in budget season. So, and this is another example of like, what should the relationship be? And what, as a board member, is reasonable for me to expect from the relationship? And when should I feel ill done? And when should it be like, no, that's just the way it works. And they had their thing and they did their thing. I don't agree with their decision, but I think they're playing by the rules, right? That's the way I tried to frame it in a recent conversation. I think we're in a point where, as a charter department, we're trying to figure out that relationship fully. And this is one example of how that works. It kind of budget conversations this time around didn't always feel good in that way. And this reconnects back to budget on the backside too, right? So I think I definitely tried to express it exactly that way. This is part of that larger conversation.
So to that end, what say do we have? Are they just gonna make the decision and tell us, or?
So that's a really interesting, I don't know, that's interesting, right? Because what happens if, so we have attorneys we use for some other things, but when it comes to issues of the charter, when it comes to issues of law and charter intersection, and we have our legal department. And so I think what's really important is, what's really important is we need to trust our legal department or our people to make sure that we get a really clear explanation of why they believe this is within the realm of what it should be. And we should ask a lot of questions about that to make sure that we walk away and we feel like, yeah, okay, you're right. I get it. I didn't get it before. Now I get it. Thank you for explaining. But I think we just want to make sure that we have those conversations for depth.
Well, maybe if you feel like you need support from the rest of the board, talk.
Yeah.
I wonder if we should ask for a work session with some of them. or the city council meet in a work session to talk about this. Just, if they just heard this conversation we're having right now, I think some of them might have some doubts.
Yeah, look, I think, and it's bigger, another thing that's important is this is not just about schools, right? So this is schools, police, fire. Fire who have already gone off in the direction of like, that's fine, we don't want to do in-house IT anyways. But police definitely do not feel that way. And have been respectful of the conversations when we did at the last one. The chief and I had been at the last several meetings. And one of the police commissioners did come to the last meeting. I do think there's a certain, to a certain extent, I'm there trying to best represent what I think are your interests. But ultimately I'm the staff, right? And you're the elected representatives of schools. And I think the extent to which I push the case, I've already got some people cranky at me based on the extent to which I've been pushing the case already. If it's just me going to continue to ask those questions, I don't know how much further we're gonna get. So, and again, I don't know that this is 100% wrong. I don't think any of it's done with malice, but I think I'm not 100% there. Like, oh, I totally get it. I understand it. Things look correct. So,
Lee, did you have another comment?
I did, because I really appreciate what you said, Pip. It's fallen just after, or at least the notice that at least I feel, which is we're being now dictated to, as opposed to being part of the conversation, falls on the end of the budget cycle and what happened with the budget cycle as well. And from my perspective, it is. I am struggling to understand, like, if this was about operational efficiency or budget, fine. I get that that's what they want to try and achieve, but we have separate goals than the city does, than the municipality does. And I need to be cognizant of that. And I think that needs to be forefront in our minds when we say we're going to just not participate in the conversation anymore, or we've ticked somebody off to the point where we just don't think we should actually have that conversation anymore. I'm happy to go have that conversation, whether it's with the mayor or with the city manager, because I'm concerned. And from an efficiency standpoint, has anybody even stepped back to look at the efficiencies that would be achieved by combining this effort?
So what I can tell you, Lee, is part of one of the conversations early on was one of our first go rounds around it was the police and I and Tom Lotz talking about how very different systems are, and then kind of talking about it's not totally clear that there are obvious efficiencies at the moment, what those would be, and the counselors asked for the CIO to do some work with the departments around identifying all the different types of services that are being provided through the IT people at police and at the schools. What are all the different platforms we're using? There was a variety of different things they referred to as kept referred to as the matrix. And they did come back with some stuff to analyze some of those things. There hasn't been a distinct conversation about personnel and like what it would mean for existing personnel in charter departments if this was to occur. I think that's an unspoken conversation that's like people know that's in the room too, as a possibility, that if there are efficiencies that could mean, you don't need folks in different other departments, but it hasn't driven the primary dialogue.
Okay, anyone else? Shall we request a work session of board members?
I would like that, Nancy.
It just seems to be a consensus for that.
Is there a reason we can't attend the governance committee and simply speak to her? And I'm just wondering in terms of.
Good, and I think what would have been good probably before is to have that opportunity previously But at this point, the governance committee has finished its work on it and has sent it to the council. And so it might be, like I said, could be multiple, what they're anticipating. The folks, the lawyers from the legal department were saying, process wise, probably what we're looking at is 2, but most likely 3 readings of the proposed ordinance before they would take any action. And I think those readings require public hearings as part of it. So I think maybe the right approach is go to the initial reading, part of the public hearing, and then depending on how you feel walking out of that initial one, then maybe it's time to request a work session. I don't know.
Yeah, I would just add that the public hearing is a good forum, but I mean, we had the budget work session, which was very limited in terms of what we're able to discuss. I think it's a good to have one of those readings go past, but it is not the same dynamic in terms of going to a public hearing and like making an argument versus like having a conversation.
Right.
And so I do think it's worth revisiting post public hearing. But yeah, because it's just different. It's
To request a work session, yeah.
Similar but opposite. I don't think that the work session was effective, nor was it guided by our priorities or needs. And so I would, we could do a public hearing, but instead I would recommend requesting being on the agenda, period. And a school board presentation related to IT infrastructure related to, so at least there's clarity around the school board has requested being included on this agenda. I know that it took maybe 5 tries to get a work session scheduled, which we had been talking about since February, and then I don't think it was effective. So I think it's more about putting the concerns out there, then it's up to the council to address, but I don't think they're gonna get addressed in a conversation.
So one thing I just say is probably from the city perspective, because I don't want to be intellectually dishonest in presenting their arguments. So I think what they would say is they have a right as a council to develop ordinances. They are working in close consultation with legal to try to make sure that they legally have the ability to do it. And if they legally have, and we've had some verbal confirmation from legal that that's the case and that they're gonna have a more robust kind of written description of why this is within the power of the council to do. So then I think it's twofold. If you want to say it is within your power to do it, well, one is it or is it not within your power? That's a really I'm not sure how to approach. I'm not totally sure how to approach that conversation. I think the city would feel like us as part of the overall umbrella, that once we have, if legal tells us it's legal, then it's legal. And then the next question then would be, if that happens, what, which they've already said, but I think they're gonna say, yes, it's legal, and here's the reason why. So there was whatever we're doing with that. And the second piece is gonna be, if it's legal, maybe you still shouldn't judge that you should do that. Shouldn't make that choice, even if you have the legal ability to do so. So.
I would just say that you're getting into legalese in a way that like sorry, totally.
Yeah.
My editorial, but I think it's not about consensus or agreement in this case. It's about, here is the state RSA around school boards and the jurisdiction and the responsibilities. And we feel X, Y, and Z is so their counsel, they can still do it. They can still take their legal counsel and do that. But I just think it's really critical that it gets on the public agenda and the public discussion, as opposed to like a back and forth of like written responses from lawyers. Because it sounds like that's how everyone is feeling on the school board, that like this raises some concerns about jurisdiction and the schools operating within our budget. I don't know. I guess it's more about, to me, expressing the concern and than it is about finagling with lawyers.
No, that's good.
Okay, so how should we move forward here? What do should we ask for a work session? Should we ask to be put on the agenda future city council meeting, what is the consensus of the group here?
I think agenda whenever the first reading is, or if, I mean, I think the work session could be the same. It just feels like. I'm not, sorry, not the work session, the public hearing. There's a public hearing, agenda request, or work session, right?
It seems like the agenda request is just a little bit more intentional in terms of the board's action in the context of the public hearing.
Yeah, I think it's that our presentation is posted ahead of time with the agenda. It's something that others can look at. We can get. I mean, I think too, it puts a spot for our teachers to look at it as well and think about how this is going to impact their
Yeah, I think it's a
work.
good first step, yeah.
Okay.
My only concern about that is that I assume Zach would be the one to present that. And he's sort of already had.
They've heard a lot.
Right, so I'm wondering if it's better if they hear from board members at this point. But I guess it's not to say we couldn't participate in the presentation.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good if we're at least there.
I think Byron and Lee speak a lot of like tech stuff. I don't. I nominate them.
I'm happy to present.
Okay, well,
Or Ryan too.
Ryan.
God, we have three.
Maybe if the three of you could get together, make write a presentation and then.
Well, it could even be prior to that, is this time between now and August where it's like, it's time to sit down and have a conversation with the CIO. How do you envision what the mechanism would be to blah, blah, blah? We think that's so, so I think there's ways to have some of those dialogues that are probably going to be more constructive than starting at a public meeting. I think there's opportunities for us to engage some people and have some dialogues and draw some conclusions about whether or not we feel like want to tell you you're doing bad stuff publicly.
I like that. I like the idea of asking whether it's even, or even the city council.
Yeah, sitting down with having a couple of you sit down with legal, having a couple of you sit down with CIO. Yeah. And just have conversations. Get the answers quick. Yeah. So.
But we have to get to the councilors because they're the ones that have to vote on the ordinance change.
And
So-
August does come fast.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
And it sounds like it's already moving in that direction anyway. We've already passed the point where we actually have much of a say in anything except for the fact that it's going to go in front of the city council for readings. So the city
Well, I think-
council is who we really should be engaging with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think it's that's a good point.
I love the idea of trying to change hearts and minds, but it sounds like there hasn't been an open reception to that concept now. And I think what we're talking about is a challenge to the authority of the school board. And so that doesn't, and school operations. And so I think that is like a public presentation notice, and happy if to support wherever the board goes with that. But I just don't think one-on-one conversations are where to express that in a constructive way.
Did you want to say something, Genevieve?
I think the intention is just not as to find out, it's more fact finding.
Yes.
So the interaction is more fact finding to find out what their intentions are. So then we know how to counteract their, I'm gonna say it, power grab. I'm not wrong, and you know it. But sorry, I've been known for speaking my mind. But I think the opportunity to have the interaction to find out exactly, to get that fact-finding information, find out what their thought process is. Not that they'll totally be as transparent as we would love, but it will at least give us an idea on how to go, which direction to go in from there.
And
Good
that's
point,
what I'm
Genevieve.
suggesting. Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting is not trying to convince
I'm
anybody.
convinced, I understand.
It's exactly that. It's trying to, and I think they'll be completely transparent. I think they're going to be completely transparent from their own perspective, what
Love
they
it.
think the appropriate approach is. I don't have any doubt with anybody. I think that's going to be, you'll get their honest, transparent opinion about why they believe this is the correct course of action.
Okay, so how we do, we have to end this conversation because we have more things on the agenda. How
Work session.
work session? Work session. Agenda, okay. How many people would like a work session?
I think we need to know what they're thinking before we know how to counterattack.
But we don't necessarily
How-
have a.
But we will have.
It takes time to get.
We go to.
It takes a, you know, on the agenda. Gotta get that bus rolling.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we do both? We can do, we could do the agenda. When we
Same
can
time we-
request for the agenda, but we can have the sit down prior to. Get ourselves on the agenda, and then once you've had the back and forth, then you know how to present
Yeah,
when you're
build-
on the agenda.
Build that into the presentation then. Yep, absolutely,
Yeah.
Genevieve. I like
Do
it.
both.
Okay, so,
I'd so present.
And then.
I
Really?
Present.
okay, so we're saying we'll attempt to get on the, we'll request to get on the agenda, but at the same time that we're doing that, we'll try to set up a meeting with the new person and
They don't.
legal and whoever else.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe all you guys, but it's like
Yeah,
a team of people who
right.
have.
You
a
can
couple
let
of
everybody
benefits.
know when these meetings are gonna happen. So we'll attempt, we will get on the agenda. We'll set up these meetings with the principals involved and anybody's welcome to come. Okay,
Sounds great. Thank you. Sounds great. Thank you, guys.
Yes. All right. Okay, one last thing, Carrie.
I missed the last two meetings, so I apologize, but I don't believe that sort of the budgeting and the positions have been. I guess I was curious about the posted positions that were not funded in the budget, and many of those are still posted. Is that all?
All over, all done. They should have, if they're not down, then we'll make sure they're down.
Okay,
But we're C-stall. We're not filling those things.
there aren't, the new positions that were in the budget increase are not being hired, like.
Not be hiring.
Like,
We're not hiring director of counseling, for example. We're
okay,
not-
those are still up as.
Thank you, and we'll take care of that.
Okay.
Apologies.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. That's a very full discussion. Next, we have consideration and approval of policies. First reading.
All right. So first we have our school calendar policy, which is just recoded from the previous version or by the NHSBA. So some of the my notes up and then I lost them. And I can I can just tell you what I remember and then you can add more if you want to.
Okay.
But I think what, there were some changes to the deadlines for voting on approving calendars, right? But it wasn't too far from what we already do, as I recall.
Right, so the big changes were on line 8, just talking about the number of days for teachers and certified professionals. And then on line 12, basically saying that support staff will follow collective bargaining or individual contracts so that we're not going in there again next year because we haven't gone through support staff collective bargaining again. The rest of the policy was the same. The other big change was in section D, which starts on line 43. This is to be in alignment now with the just ratified approved contract with APT. Saying the calendar will be developed by the superintendent, submitted to the board by February 1st. Which puts the power back in the hands of the superintendent to set the calendar. And that the board should approve the final calendar by March 1st, based on previous history that's around it. That's late, but that's around the time that other decisions have been made. The rest of this has not changed from the current ICA, which is now being called IC. So those are the big changes in the ones that are in yellow.
I think there was, the other change I remember was, that we now are legally required by the state to use states, labels for holiday, names of holidays. On every calendar we.
Yep.
Oh. And present.
Yep.
So that's going after, that's obviously going for indigenous.
Indigenous peoples is Columbus, yep.
So
And just a question, the text on here is, sorry, I'm making a motion to, do we need a motion?
Yeah, no.
Yes. Motion to approve.
Second.
Is it first reading or yes, go, or single?
This is
First reading.
first of two.
First reading.
Please do.
If I remember the remote days, like that terminology in here is super confusing. But if I remember, that was like a post-COVID. There can be like 2 remote days subsidy. Is that just the standard boilerplate?
There are a lot more policies in the wings that are related to the changes to the 306 rules, which some of this touches, and I have a feeling we're gonna see some of these come back around again, but what's there is currently right now we can live with.
next rule is just for, or our,
Minimum standards for approval of public schools.
Right.
And those went through major overhaul last year and are posted on the Department of Ed website. They were finally approved back last December. A lot of changes that went with that.
Just 2 quick questions that I feel like come up pretty much every time we debate the calendars from a lot of parents. And one is, do we truly feel this is the earliest in the year we can approve the calendar just from an operational standpoint? Because I do believe that every year people are saying, you know, we need it sooner. We can't get travel plans made. And along those lines, graduation has pretty much always been the first Friday in June. Can we not just admit that so people can plan? Because every year people are like, grandma can't book the flight because nobody's telling us when it is.
Yep.
It would be so cool to just end that, like, we're pretending it's not and it always is. I mean, has it ever not been that Friday? Ever? Anyone?
What happens if there's a lot of snow days though?
Well, but
supposed to be
we
within
literally
5
print
days.
the diplomas in what, February? Right? Like, when do you give them your name for your diploma? We print them like months before we know how many.
It's not
snow days we
February,
have.
but it's
It's way
it's like at least 2, it's at least 2 months in advance.
So it just feels like we're going through a lot of artifice every year to pretend we don't know when the date is. And it would be like nice to maybe not be quite so arcane in policy. Not that it's
Suggesting
real.
that, are you suggesting
I'm
that the
suggesting-
policies that it should include
Well,
that?
we have this really, where's the line? It's like a very roundabout, like, shall be like,
59.
where is it? You know what I'm talking
The
about.
high school graduation date shall be set no more than 5 school days or 30 instructional hours before the end of the scheduled school year.
Could we not just say first Friday in June? Like, is there a reason not to?
Well, it has.
See,
it has to be-
ED 306.8.
I don't mean to be difficult, but it's just like a maddening thing for families every year.
I agree.
And since the purpose of this, I think, is so people can plan their lives.
Maybe we could recommend that the procedures around this.
Yeah.
Change.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know. It just feels like on the actual calendar, we can't, it would be nice if the graduation date was just on there. Sorry.
Any reason not to?
We discuss this every year.
Your opinion.
Regulation, which is the extension of losses, it would be 5 days. And it won't be more separation than 5 days.
There was a reg that speaks to it, but again, there have been changes to the reg, so.
Seniors aren't in school.
I'd rather go with the state minimum, I think, although I appreciate the motivation to do it as
But maybe,
as possible.
but maybe when we go and when we can announce it.
Does the ceremony have to be the graduation date? Can those be different things?
That's great. I like solution thinkers.
Well, can we pass?
What would that even?
I think put on the policy coming to other issues.
I'm happy to report back on some of the concerns that you have
Okay.
for second reading.
Can we have a roll call vote for first reading?
First
Wait,
reading.
sorry, Lisa, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
practically speaking, if it's operationally feasible to change February 1st and March 1st deadlines to earlier, I would love to consider making an amendment to do that, but I don't want to do that if it's not operational. Not feasible.
I think a friendly amendment to approve with back to policy with that change.
So the policy, the exact says it.
It's first reading.
That's first reading change, but I don't wanna.
First read.
Yeah,
I just think stick with the state mandate, try to have the intention to do earlier.
What was your suggestion?
if it is feasible for the draft to be submitted to the board and approved earlier, then I would change the phrase in the policy. If it's not, then I would.
What did we, last year, when did we ultimately?
So late.
I mean, these are the way I read this is the drop dead date.
Yeah.
You can do it December 1st and approve it December 15th. Like, this is at the latest.
When you, Lisa, when would you want it to be? If you had your, whatever, you know.
You know, people get, I mean, what I hear from a lot of families, they get together with their families over the winter break.
Yeah.
And when they're sitting, you know, with everybody around the table, they want to be able to plan.
Plan.
how it is.
Yeah, so now during the holidays and graduation.
Having it like in December.
Pre-holidays.
Too soon. And I don't want to box you in.
Wouldn't that be December for the following year?
Yes,
For like a year and a half?
yes.
Oh, I don't plan that much, sorry. It's not the target group of this. I was like, December for June sounds good, let's do that.
What keeps us from being able to decide?
Sorry.
Okay.
No, I mean, for the most part, not a lot. I think we could move it up. There's no reason there's not like information, for the most part, it's not information we don't have. We're really looking at what's going on with
The one
elections.
thing, I was just gonna say, that the one hiccup we had here the year before was it was the primary day and there was all this like waiting and when are they gonna set it? And that's the one thing that we were sort of like hesitant because we couldn't really say definitively, yes, the primary is this Tuesday. Oh, wait a minute, no, it's this Tuesday. Wait, there's an election. Like, it was that.
But that's only in the case of the federal, the battle over the presidential.
Right.
Where New Hampshire's trying to move around to stay ahead of people. So on all of the state level stuff, it's not an issue. So like
Right.
like the city clerk has already given us for the next year, maybe the year after,
Yep.
the anticipated election dates, we already have those. So for the most part, there's really not a ton that gets in the way. There's not some reason other than like, oh, I'd like to have a later date to turn my homework in, but we don't, so I think we could move it up and it wouldn't be, if we wanted to be in a position where we had it submitted to the board at, I guess, first meeting in December and then try to approve it the second meeting in December and then you were done. Then I think we could look at getting into that cycle. I understand that. So.
Okay, all that.
So are we amending or are we?
Well, this is first.
It's only for
We
read.
can do it. We'll
Yeah,
take
so
it
we
to
can just
second
take that feedback.
reading. To second reading.
Maybe.
Discuss it.
You know, that's.
Okay. We have-
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Lisa. We have a roll call
Yep.
for first reading and that amendment will be in the second reading.
Lisa Rappaport. Carrie Nolte.
Yes.
Byron Matto.
Yes.
Lee Hudson.
Yes.
Brian French.
Yes.
Chip Clues.
Yes.
Nancy Claiberg.
Yes.
Fish Campbell.
Yes.
Genevieve Beckstead Muskie.
Yes.
Passed.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Okay. We have
Oh, go
one,
ahead.
we have a second policy.
Go ahead.
The second policy is eligibility for interscholastic athletics. This is a policy that we have not had before. We didn't necessarily have a policy for eligibility requirements besides, the ones around academics, but this one goes a little bit further to include, information about registration, and it includes some stuff about students on IEPs that are not in our other policy. And then there's some new language or relatively new language that comes from new state laws regarding trans kids in sports and participation on teams. Much of which Eddie was rather uncomfortable with. But we, at the same time, our participants in the NHIA and HIAA, Interscholastic Athletics Association. And in order to be able to compete with those teams, we have to follow their rules. So, the language that we chose to use was that we will follow, that our teams will be established following the guidelines of NHIA.
Do we have a motion to approve in a second, and then we'll discuss? Okay. Second. Byron, thank you. Okay, discussion. Lisa.
So I'll start with a simple question. I just want to clarify to make sure I understand this. Can you speak to why you have the reference to club teams in a policy on interscholastic athletics? That would seem to me to be more intramural and not governed by NHIAA. That's on line 8 and 9. I just wondered why that's there.
They're still interscholastic.
Would that be
I
like,
think that's a great question. And
Because I'm thinking
I don't
like for intramural teams that don't follow NHIAA is how I think of club teams, but maybe you're meaning it in a different way.
I could see that being like how girls soccer plays in like a summer league in Manchester. Like, I feel like that's how it could fall, but I hear what you're saying, because I've like club sports to me is like a completely separate thing.
Well, I guess because this is a policy about interscholastic athletics, so I'm just concerned about lumping in sports that are not
Intramural
interscholastic.
and nothing.
So unless there's something I'm missing, I would want to consider striking that.
Do we have club sports at our high school?
No, I mean,
they're separate.
Well, we have there's
They are.
a running program that is not an interscholastically competing running program, I think, with the name. But, so I know there's at least that.
Our girls hockey team was a club team because there wasn't NHIAA, there wasn't like enough people, but we played interscholastically. We played every other girls team in the state because at that time they were all club teams.
But-
So I'm just like, you know, even if we don't,
So would this,
it doesn't sound like we have that.
so would this apply to like so at the elementary schools, we have 5th grade basketball. Would this policy apply, which I think is not an NHIAA.
right, no, it's not. It's strictly, yeah,
It's between our schools, but it is.
but it's not. I feel like it's,
Policy apply to 5th grade basketball.
I think,
Policy does include 5th to 12th grade.
Does, okay.
Or apply
so
to-
club must just be their filler word for just like any other thing other than like.
I don't think it's a good word though, because it does apply to independent.
Correct, it's not good.
No, it's not the right word. So that's what it means.
Okay.
Can we raise our hands just
Oh,
to
sorry.
try? No, that's all
I
right.
did, sorry.
Lisa, do you want to?
Yeah, so I guess the reason I'm asking is this kind of goes to, like, I think it's a fundamentally different thing to say if we're having interscholastic sports that are governed by NHIAA. We follow their rules, so everybody's playing by the same things. And I think it's something very different to codify in policy that we are going to discriminate against trans athletes and exclude them and only allow students with original birth certificates to participate. And like 5th grade basketball or like a middle school, like running club or something like that. Like it's very different in my mind. And I think when you think about the mental health and physical health benefits of athletics, I would like to see us be as inclusive as we can be, especially in the younger grades. And I think that's very different than having rules for the high school football team or lacrosse or something like that, where there's rules that NHAA has that everybody has to play by the same rules. Maybe we like them or we don't, but those are the rules. So I guess that's part of why I'm concerned about expanding this to lower grades or beyond NHIAA sports.
Well, it does say middle school here. We said teams for middle and high school will follow guidance. but-
Don't agree with that. I mean, I'll vote no either way. So, I mean, I just think there's so many things about this that are.
Carrie.
Oh, Lisa's still going, Lisa's still going. No, I don't, no, I don't think there was an intentional kind of.
No, it was.
Finished. I did, no, I guess the only thing I would say is I think we have to make a choice as a district about how much we want our athletics to be inclusive or exclusive of all of our kids. I understand there are state laws that somewhat tie our hands in terms of how we have to think about it, but I think to the fullest extent possible, we should err on the side. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So the only thing I'll say about the club line, I'd be in favor of striking it because I think it's muddy. But I think the other way you could do it is you could say, 'cause I think I don't know, my take on the way this is written is that it's written in such a way that sponsored club teams within the interscholastic athletic sort of umbrella. So I think it's inclusive of that. So I don't think it would apply to club teams who are not participating in the context of the NHI or whatever the acronym is. So I think we could do one of two things. We could either strike it, which I'd be in favor of, or we could be hyper specific in that parentheses around it being specific to club teams that would be interscholastic under NIH, whatever the acronym is. Yeah. I feel like those would be two ways we could go about dealing with the club team.
Anyone else?
I don't know.
Terry?
So I have a lot of concern, I mean, in addition to concerns about excluding folks, based on, sex and birth certificates. I have a lot of like equity concerns around the requirement of an original birth certificate. It's not something many families, who are low income, prioritize as far as, or not prioritize, I shouldn't say it that way, but have ready access to, nor the resources to jump through many of the hoops. So I find that very interesting and strange. I guess my overall, like the other pieces, like the impact testing, which is a great tool. I think my understanding was that we were using it for high impact sports, not necessarily all sports. So I don't know if that's a change in practice or not. It's a change of practice, but that's also a financial barrier. That costs money to do unless the school is sponsoring it or offering funding for completion of that. So just from like a mental health, substance use prevention standpoint, seems like there's some barriers for folks that have less access to resources to participate in sports, which is absolutely a risk in general for them being included in the team. My question would be, is this like, how do I even ask? So could there just be a policy that says students on teams participating in NHIAA leagues follow NHIAA policies, period? That's it? Or do we need to get?
know better
Second
about
that amendment.
So, like, I honestly, I don't recall that we left in this whole section about the birth certificate.
We did, but there was a lot more in there that we struck.
Okay, so we
That
started
was
some of it, but we left.
specific about what could be provided for evidence. We left it very open and,
We got rid of.
yeah,
that's right.
there was evidence and it was, it got very specific. So just saying student paradigm must provide other evidence, which could be even something that a doctors know, or doctors, the discharge papers and say, here's Charlie Brown, male, and if the athletic director considers that to be other evidence, we wanted to leave that more open for a lot of reasons, which I think also would address the concern about the original birth certificate.
Is this a required policy? No, it's not.
This is
It is
required.
now required.
This is
That's why we're
required.
trying
Yep.
to write one, but.
Policy is
You can take-
required, not
You can
necessarily.
take that under advisement.
And then I think, I mean, and this is just having done the impact stuff, but like, I think that's a good thing, but I also think if that's something we're required to have, then having resources available to support that.
Genevieve, yeah.
Genevieve,
So, well, you're referencing things that were removed, referenced that aren't referenced there now. Where is that? The last document showed me highlights and line and markouts. You're creating a policy now because of new regulations. So I'm assuming that's why we're not seeing the things that you didn't
The things that
include.
we didn't include were from the sample policy from NHSBA, which is where the New Hampshire School Board Association.
And where is that?
It's
Could look at the
Policy committee minutes.
yeah.
that's a good question, kind of procedurally. So
Well, if you're, I
the
mean,
strikeouts on the other one,
The other.
it's the old
Yeah.
version and the new
Compared to the
version.
new, right, usually when
So
we
when
have
you're-
an old version, we do that, but we didn't have an old version.
Side
because you're
note,
creating a policy.
side note, does
Exactly.
Genevieve have access to the NHSBA policy, portal that has all the sample policies?
Well, and we can just make sure make sure.
I mean, if
She
you
gets
presented it
all
at
the
the
policies.
meetings, so I didn't have to dig for it, would be
Right.
something.
Yeah, I think that's.
Because I can't really make a decision on this, not knowing
Like what came.
what I don't know.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay, Nathan.
I just have a quick thing. Carrie, you mentioned the impact testing.
Yeah.
So was your point with that? It mentions all, what sports wouldn't have to take it? And then secondly, there's no payment that when
Do you
I've
do it at
I've taken
school?
it twice, it's not something that you pay for.
Okay.
So it's obviously included in our budget with athletics, but students don't need to throw $20 at it online and say, okay, I've taken it.
So my experience with it is in urgent care. It's an actual big money maker that it's $50 for testing at urgent cares. So I don't know if as long as the school district is mobilized, is providing those resources but if you're extending it to all sports, it's a higher volume. But this was with like a physical exam and a practitioner oversight.
Right.
So
And I guess also what I'm like stuck on is that I think it has already been all sports before the policy, to my
Okay.
understanding. Like I think, because I was also like, what sport wouldn't, I guess, was also.
I think it's part of the concussion policy or protocol too, like we have a whole rundown on that that also mentions.
this is the pre-test.
No, I know, but that mentions the pre-testing.
To participate in the sport in our school system, you have to surrender a physical. That's standard.
Correct.
The
but this is-
testing
yeah.
is like a specific neurologic
Specific.
exam.
Yeah.
Do it as
It's
a,
like, what was the shape that was shown 20,000 hours ago?
you do it as a baseline, and then if you get a concussion, you have your baseline.
Okay, I got this.
Even that, I believe, was not in any policy, right? It was just our procedure
I think so.
or practice, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's my understanding that it's already been all, so that's not.
And it's
something that-
provided by the
that- Yes,
school.
yeah.
Genevieve, for your reference, at the end, in the policy committee meeting minutes from 5/21, that there is a link to the.
Inside of this set,
Yeah.
inside of this
On
agenda.
our agenda, in the policy minutes, bottom, you can find the sample policy. Not that we expect you to read it right now, but just for future reference, it's usually in the minutes. Okay, anybody else?
should we take it back to the policy committee with those recommendations? Or
Well, I think we should take a vote on the first read and then,
that was first reading too? Okay, yeah.
unless there's any other.
Real quick, I just wanna know, implication of not passing, JDIC. Or not having JDIC, like when does it become a problem for our athletes in terms of their?
Season starts with practice season, like August. Yeah,
And that's for the NHS.
NHIA.
We have to have the policy.
Alphabet soup, yeah.
Does NHIAA require this? I know there's a state law, but does NHIAA require?
NHIAA is defaulting to following what the state is required.
So maybe we need to go back and look at specific statutes that we need to address in this policy. To your question, Carrie, can we just have a policy?
When is our August meeting? Just wondering.
This one is the 12.
12. So we also could ask,
That's before tryouts, just to throw it out.
we could, we could ask for something from, whether it's from
Yeah.
Oz or it's directed from Jeff Collins at NHIA to say, what does this look like on the ground in 2 weeks? You know, is there a checklist that goes to everybody? Like, how does this work? To each of those things are possible too, but we don't want to be, if there's like football, I think football's the earliest starter. And I
Correct.
think they're a week ahead of everybody else. So if it's like whenever the 20th or something, we don't want to be behind the 20th, miss a deadline and then be in a situation where we're putting the fall season at risk for teams. So.
The motion is to approve first reading right now.
Yep.
Genevieve Beckstead Muskie,
No.
Fish Campbell,
No,
Nancy Claiberg,
We're gonna go and discuss this more at the policy committee, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, then I don't know.
Ted Clues,
No.
Brian French,
No.
Kate Hudson,
Nope.
Byron Maddow,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte,
No,
Lisa Rappaport.
No.
you're gonna get scared by it.
So it's 1 to 8, but it's going back, so.
So
May I say why?
procedural
What,
question.
it was.
That's what I voted yes.
We've never had a first reading vote down.
Yeah.
I feel like
This first reading.
it doesn't advance, potentially does not. I know that's not what people were thinking when they voted. But it does not, if it does not advance past the first reading. That's just, now it's just defeated. It's just defeated for now.
So if we come back with it again, we're gonna need a
First read and second read.
two-thirds majority. Because it's new, right? Or is that the same meeting? Robert's rules on.
I don't know.
We'll have to,
It's been voted down, so if it's the same motion, I don't know if it's,
It won't be the same policy.
JJSC, we're right.
It won't be the same. So we could in policy committee make the decision that it goes with 1 read
Okay,
instead of 2. And see if
Yeah.
it passes. at
Yeah,
the
that was-
meeting.
Okay.
I mean,
not the
I'm,
greatest parliamentarian, but I think we might be skating here.
I'm doing just enough to be dangerous, but the RSA is like just the beginning part of this policy.
Yeah.
And does not go into a lot of this. So I would, even maybe it could be in compliance with RSA section 193.41.
Yeah.
But,
And NHIAA,
and then I
period.
I can't say it. That thing's gonna be.
New Hampshire Scholastic Athletics Association, is that right?
Yeah.
So we will try to come back with an entirely new draft of this.
Here,
August 12th, we're good, we're cranking through.
Do we have a meeting, what is it, July?
30th.
July 30th.
I agree with Carrie, and I'd also just like to say a lot of these new policies, like NHSBA has been adding verbiage to the policies in the drafts that is not in statute anywhere. And I think it's in an effort to, make it maybe follow what they believe to be the spirit of the law in various ways, but I think that it will serve us well in many instances to simply stick to what's in statute.
Thank you. Anything else? Yvette?
No, that's it.
Thank you.
It's enough.
Okay, next we have committee updates. We have minutes for the policy committee meeting of May 21st. Teaching and learning committee of May 30th. Library trustees, April 16th and May 3rd. Policy committee, again, June 11th. Sustainability committee, May 22nd. Finance committee, June 13th. Busy.
After questions, I
Yes.
wanted to mention something from the committee as well.
Does it have to do with these?
No,
Okay, what does it have to do?
rec.
Oh, that's under committee, correct?
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
but I don't have the rec committee minutes yet. Their structure's a little different because it's an advisory committee. But the last meeting was about the playground right here and the design and installation. One thing I found very interesting after our conversations about playgrounds was that the installation is forecasted to be 2 to 3 weeks. So as just knowing what now about all the construction and the things, it's not like delaying a year is like a year, like it's the planning process is really important to the vendors as far as then their timeline is 1 to 2 weeks of installation. I thought that might be interesting. The other thing that we discussed was the after-school programming, because that's come up. So the rec program is full. A lot of folks did choose like not 5-day options where they may have had 5-day options before, but either 2-day or 3-day. In the meantime, the peak program did commit to being at New Franklin after the MC3 program wasn't available. And so there was a lot of wavy, changey things happening. So rec is full at 30 students. They're going to wait to implement the program to see what the space holds in order to increase that. But their wait list is under 10 is what I got. I don't know the exact number. But a lot of folks that had been on the wait list either transitioned to or signed up for peak and then dropped or et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to get those updates and I don't have minutes yet.
Any questions for Harry? Thank you, Harry. And I just wanted to note, I'm representing the board on the sustainability committee, and I just included this in the packet. The middle school submitted to the sustainability committee suggestions for where solar panels should be in the city. So they put a lot of time and effort into it. The students with their two teachers, Chris Rhodes and Nicole Stoneberg. I just thought it was pretty impressive, so I included that. It was in the minutes for the sustainability committee. I thought you all wanted that. So the middle school students and the high school students also, but this was just a specific letter that was written to the sustainability committee. See that? Okay,
Nancy, I have one quick thing.
yes.
I serve on the city master plan steering committee, and so we had our first meeting. This was like early June. There was very preliminary stuff. There's nothing really to report with that, but as we go along, I think there's one meeting every month this next year. So I'll put the minutes in our.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we probably have all gotten emails about the master plan, so anybody that wants to serve on a committee, it's kind of an interesting process, if you have time. Okay, we'll move on to future agenda requests. We have the form that we ask people to fill out, but feel free to email Brian, me. Yes.
So finance committee.
Oh, you wanted to talk? I'm sorry.
No,
It's great.
You're doing a good job. Me too, trust me.
The finance committee met, Lee and Brian and Lynn Roth. And the meeting minutes are in there, but what I wanted to, take a chance to, do is point out the committee goals that are in the minutes. And these are the 4 goals, but I know that, it's with a new committee that we had talked about like what the goals are coming out of it. So I just wanted to have, any open discussion on those specific goals and feedback around them.
But it was awesome to see the goals, and I also really appreciated the timeline of trying to think ahead to have that conversation begin in November instead of January. It's better to start the budget hearings in the new year on a much stronger footing. So I really like the attention to the communication and to the front loading. It's great.
All right, I have a question. Is there any, do you feel it falls under the purview of this committee where we had comments, a lot of comments from the city council about our special ed district placements?
Yeah.
This be a place to examine some of those or?
Well, we can get into discussion with Brian about specifically, if I'm remembering correctly, the amount that the tuition towns are paying relative to what our costs are for the special education services. And so I do think I could see a recommendation coming out of that committee around potential changes there if we thought that, you know, those were lopsided or we weren't getting the proper funding for the tuition.
We'll say that I've already had a conversation. Superintendent Zadrek and I are always in ongoing dialogue about stuff. And one of the things I said, just a heads up, I anticipate coming out of this last budget cycle that there will be a general interest from the board, from the council to let's look at least the 1 year snapshot of what what was the makeup of SU 50 paid
Yeah.
for special education services versus the cost of the services that we received.
Yeah.
And that if we, but I don't know how much further we'll be able to go back. We may go back 1 year, maybe for lucky to kind of, but it might be tough. I'm not gonna promise that.
We'll have it. This year, we're using new software to track services.
Yeah.
That will see 50 balls are on.
Yes, you 50.
At least we can see what our expenses are.
Yeah.
But that won't be starting until this school. We look back with school. Data won't be as.
Yeah. But I do think it is an area
But
that
it's definitely worth the conversation.
Yeah, and right now, that would be if we're gonna adjust, and he knows this, and I think he's got communities. I think it's good to have the clear data, because he's got some communities who think they're getting a bad deal,
totally.
right? And so where we've got some people over here who suspect they're getting a great deal, we're subsidizing, stuff. So I think just having a yearly snapshot of data, doing, here's the actual numbers, it's what it looks like. And then, of course, process any changes, though, in those arrangements would be contingent upon looking back at the area agreement and either creating an additional clarification document, or if necessary, altering the area agreement, which would then require all the towns to vote on the amendment, and all those communities and us, Portsmouth, and all the 7 towns. So anyways, but I think we need to collect that data and have a real conversation based on that.
Carrie,
Go ahead.
I was just curious about the facility, the space committee,
Building needs committee.
building needs committee.
Yeah, we haven't met.
I think it would be great for building needs committee to meet
Yeah.
before September when we talk about budget, just because similarly,
Yeah.
that came up a lot in our budget conversations.
Yep. And in our initial, we were getting a little, and we still gotta get through the summer. I haven't had another burst of enrollment that's like got us all flustered, but John Darrow's initial enrollment in kindergarten was definitely something where we were like, whoa, well, here we are again. But we did, it will end up being a 4th kindergarten teacher.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna be able to cover it. We've moved it around to make it work. But yeah, I think we do need to keep having that conversation. Because can you reach out at all? Yeah.
No, but I have it on my list.
Okay.
I got my budget committee.
Yeah.
We got, yeah.
I'll make sure. I know it's on his to-do list, and he sent me some stuff, so I'll add that to following up with that.
Mike, do we know where those kids are coming? Are they coming from some of these newer developments? Do we know
No,
those kids are-
what we're told, I haven't looked at like a case by case basis, but what I'm told is that there was a reasonably large turnover of families in Patriots Park. And so that the increase, the change was those apartments starting over, and new families moving into those apartments is what we've been told.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, anything else? Oh,
This is sort of committee / future agenda, but just reflecting on the tenor of the budget conversations, I think that it would be really strategically smart for us to have a presentation at the board level in the fall from teaching and learning. And maybe just because the level of detail that we're getting in there, I think would produce a lot of buy-in in terms of what we are doing behind the scenes to advance a wide variety of strategic goals and show the value of that work in a way that I think just having it in its linked at the end of this.
Minutes don't do it justice.
They really don't. And I think just having people visible to articulate the work, I think could be potentially really valuable.
That's fine.
An agenda item at our first.
I
September.
think
Maybe that's
nobody in this year, I don't know.
Give us some breathing room.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I think with each of these, whether it's finance or it's building or it's that, it makes sense. There's value a couple times a year to have the members of the board who are part of those committees and the people who are staff who are closely involved present to everybody else. This is what we've been talking about. This is what we see. Here's what's going on. We want to make sure you're having awareness. It's just a couple times a year, you know what I'm saying.
Okay. Anything else? committees. Thank you, everybody. There's a lot of work that's been done there. Okay, future agenda request. We have that form. Somebody check in on it. But if you're more comfortable sending us an email, please do that. Yes, Jim.
When do we plan to address our board goals?
We had that for the August meeting. Gonna do. Superintendent
So we're not doing a report, I mean, a retreat again, we're just.
No, we're just gonna make a public.
We're gonna one meeting.
Superintendent and board, correct? Okay. Okay, that's August 12th.
And we have,
We have Barrett coming.
Barrett's coming
in.
back in to help facilitate. Yeah.
Okay, fine, that's it. Okay, right. Okay. Now we are going into our non-public.
Public.
Public comment, sorry.
So basically in person.
Yeah, only personally. We will close the public comment, we'll open it.
So, motion to move into non-public.
I need a roll call on.
I'll be defined which are we doing under non-public.
Under C, RSA 91A32C. Genevieve Beckstead Muskie.
Here.
Yes.
Yes.
Andrew. Tish Campbell,
Yes.
Nancy Claver. Here. Pip Clues.
Yes.
Brian French, Lee Hudson,
Yes.
Byron Matto,
Yes.
Carrie Nolte.
Yeah.
Lisa Radford.
Yes.
This now ends this portion of the webinar. I'm closing this and Tish and Lee, I sent you new links to the Zoom meeting that I'm gonna open as soon as I close this.
Thank you.
Tish,
Your email.
Tish, you think you're good on your end?
We take a 5-minute break.
I'm trying to log in right now, but I think I'm good.
Okay.
All right.